Tyler, you actually don't even know what you haven't done any.
I don't know what personality type I am. I people throw a number like I'm an 8. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm a human. I don't know.
I'm an INTP with an A variant.
See, dude, that just sounds like something out of the Marvel universe. I don't know what that means.
The last couple of episodes were a little heavy. Today, not so much. We're going to talk personality types. Full disclosure, none of us are experts. So this is going to be a fun conversation about our personalities, personality assessments, some personal learnings, and anything that can point us in the direction of Jesus. And we're probably going to laugh at each other a lot today. I'm Jacob Sheriff. I'm with Josh, Tyler. This is my podcast. Let's go.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much again for joining us on the podcast today. Quick preliminaries. If you have a moment, please take a minute to like, subscribe, share this video or audio, depending on how you're consuming it. And if you have a moment to leave us a review, we would love to read those. We haven't got one in a while, so maybe this is a little bit an appeal to the heartstrings. Please let us know what you think. We need to know. We'd appreciate it greatly. Before we roll into the topic today, we're going to ask a fun question. So are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
Yep.
All right. So I haven't given this one a whole lot of thought, so I don't think it's necessarily on topic. But what was your favorite trip that you've ever taken? Favorite trip?
Okay. So off the one that I remember the first apparently was not one I ended up taking with my family. So I will preface this with saying I had a lot of very enjoyable, fun family trips. Because this sounds bad that the first thing I thought of.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Is it
Okay,
should I say the trip that's not going to get me in trouble, or should I tell I love the one with my wife?
Yeah. So my wife, my kids, as a kid growing up with my siblings and parents, all those trips, fantastic. Those are fun. Okay, so the one that I remember right off the top of my head, the reason why is my best friend growing up. He was the youngest of 4, and the nearest sibling was like 10 years older than him. So 8, 9, 10 years older than him. So he grew up almost kind of like an only child. And so he and I were together all the time. When we were sophomores in high school, the summer before our junior year, he and his parents were taking a trip to Florida, and I got to be the plus one. And so we ended up playing NBA Jam on the car ride the entire time. And he had a Sega Genesis too. And I can't remember what we played, but we played Sega because I did not have a Sega. I had an NES. That was it. So we took that, and then we went to Universal Studios, went to Disney. And when you said like the trip you remember the most, the reason why that flashed in my head the most is I'm not the greatest at rides, like theme park rides.
Yeah.
I don't know. Something like my inner ear is not set in a way that
I hate them.
That makes me able to do that. Well, my friend, he can rock with it. And so we had Burger King for breakfast on the way in to Universal Studios. I don't know if you remember how Burger King used to.
That's already a bad choice.
used to do cinnamon rolls.
Cinny Minis.
Yeah, Cinny Minis. Okay, so I had a set of those, and I can tell you that I'll never eat those again because I don't have to fully explain for all of our listeners what happened that day. But let's just say that I have a taste in my mouth that I can never have again. So that's what ended up being the most memorable is I can remember that feeling. And that was 20 something years ago. So yeah, that was the most memorable one, at least growing up.
Was that the question? Was it memorable or was it enjoyable?
Enjoyable.
Favorite trip.
Favorite trip.
Yeah.
That was overall, your favorite.
So, well, we
What the heck, man?
I don't remember things very well, and so like I don't have a lot of like tons of memories. But like that flashed in my head the first. It was the first time I went to the beach. No, not the first time. It's the first time I remember going.
This trip is just getting worse and worse.
Yeah. Oh no.
The first time I went to the beach.
It was a lot of fun.
No,
So
it wasn't.
So yeah. No, but it was the first time as a kid, not just being like with my siblings
There you go.
just doing stuff. I was with my best friend, and it was just us, and his parents. So like we were able to do more things that I would normally not do with our whole family together. So anyway, that was my.
That's your favorite trip?
Sure.
Cool.
Second only to my honeymoon in Hawaii with my wife.
There you go.
So
Yeah, you got to set things in priority. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Tyler? What's your favorite?
I recently went on a trip, and that one was great for all the people who went with me. But my most memorable or favorite was probably I think I had just turned like 20 or 21. I don't remember. And two friends and I went to California, and we just drove to California, and we were there for like 2 weeks. It was awesome, man. It was so much fun. It was just like a 32-hour drive.
life of a single 20-year-old.
Yeah, it was great. We went to Bethel and checked that out. And at first, that was like kind of the goal of the trip was like, we're going to go check out Bethel. It was like right around when they were first like getting popular and becoming a big deal. And we were like, yeah, let's go check it out. So we drove out there. We got there late, missed the first service. It was horrible. And so we're like, oh, they have a night service though. So we went to the night service. It was great. And they're like, we did not plan this trip well. Like now we have nothing to do. So from Redding, we went to San Diego and just hung out for like a week and a half in San Diego.
That's like the entire span of California.
Yeah, it was awesome, man. It was super fun. We had a really good time. Yeah, we bought longboards and just kind of skated around San Diego and hung out, had fun, had Thanksgiving together at an Italian restaurant. So weird, man. It was a weird trip, but it was so fun because it was just like, there's no responsibility. There's not. Maybe it's in hindsight. This trip is so nice.
In the moment you took
no responsibility.
In contrast.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. We had a blast.
I could have sworn you would have said going on our senior trip with us would have been your favorite.
That was a big win, like for me personally. So this is a great story. I'll keep it brief too. But for Jacob's senior trip, my sister graduated with Jacob, and they were selling.
And you're like 5 years, 6 years,
8 years,
8 years. That's a lot.
Yeah, 8 years younger than my sister, and their class was selling these like. It was really popular around like 2001, 2002, like right after right after 9/11.
Right after 9/11.
And there were those roll-up flags, like in your window that you'd roll up, and they were selling those. And they were terrible at it. But you give it to...
Don't say they. I rocked it at selling those American flags.
Not as much as I did.
But probably second only to you.
So I'm like 9 and I'm selling flags for the senior class. And I sold more than the whole class. But my mom would take me to like art shows and stuff and we would sell those. I don't know why, but anyways, that earned me a spot on their senior trip.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that was a blast too though. That was also Florida, right? That was Disney World,
Disney,
Universal. Yeah, I've got pictures with the senior class. It's really funny, man. But yeah, I got to go on Jacob's senior trip.
That's hilarious.
It was awesome.
Yeah,
we had a fantastic senior trip.
That's awesome. So for me, I got to go to New York on my senior trip. That was really fun. Had a lot of really cool experiences there. But I think as I've gotten older, I'm not much of a traveler in general. Like to me, and we'll get into this maybe a little later when we start talking about personality, but like, to me, I am totally content to just be at home and to not be interrupted and to just have quiet. And like that sounds a lot more fun most of the time than like going somewhere and like being in a car or on a plane or whatever. I think some of the more memorable, more favorite trips, I think, and this would be more work related, not family. So not to dismiss the family vacations and things that have been really fun, but I think one of the more enriching experiences was when we were traveling around capturing stories of different churches for Jubilee a few years ago. There was there was a really cool experience of just going out there and finding a story. And, we were filming all day long and shooting video. And so there was this level of like mystery about what we were going to experience. And then the fun of, can we actually capture it?
Yeah.
Now, it was super stressful, and it was a lot of time away from home, and then getting them all put together in time for Jubilee was tough. Stressful. But those experiences still kind of like, they really stick with me. So I remember traveling with Seth and Josh Weir, and like going and learning about all the different things that these churches were doing. It was just really fun. And then I would say, just from the more like general recreational standpoint, the trip that we took a couple years ago to Colorado, like where me and my siblings and all of our families were up there at the same time, that was just an awesome trip. It was just fun. Like, it was so chill. We didn't like try to cram a bunch of stuff in. Yeah. But after Jubilee, I think it was actually that Jubilee, it was nice.
You and your family you and Audrey needed it.
We needed
but it was all but one of your siblings, and we all went up to Colorado just to chill for a week and just have fun as families. And
the kids still talk about that trip, and they just had tons of fun getting to spend time with cousins. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. So, I'm not the most adventurous, like, hey, I'm going to go into the mountains. Maybe we should tell the story about me going with you and Austin up into the mountains, and you guys being like, we're going to scout ahead. I can tell you're struggling here. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to take a breather. Like finding, Josh is never going to cross that terrain. Let's go back to this campsite.
I felt like that would be, we should do one of those trips, or another trip. We should do a in the mountains episode, or at least an episode after we go on a trek.
No, we need to climb a mountain, and then on the top of the mountain, record a podcast.
Hey, I've got the gear for it.
That would be awesome.
I'm all right with that. I love this stuff. I love hiking, and that's my ultimate happy place.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, there's your story for the week, everybody. Our favorite trips. All right, let's roll into the topic. So, like you said, none of us are experts on personality, and I'd say pretty much all three of us are on the more extroverted end of the personality spectrum. Tyler actually has no clue.
There ain't no way. Yeah, introverted.
I said extroverted.
Yeah,
which is exactly not what any of us are.
The actual opposite. Yeah, so we are all on the
introverted
spectrum. But Tyler, you actually don't even know what you haven't done any.
I don't know what personality type I am. I people throw a number like I'm an 8. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm a human. I don't know.
I'm an INTP with an A variant.
See, dude, that just sounds like something out of the Marvel universe. I don't know what that means.
So, ironically, Jacob and I actually have, like, the same type that Myers-Briggs, like 16 personalities kind of variant. So the INTP is mine. Yours as well. We don't know. Maybe Tyler should take a test while we're recording or something.
I have no idea. So my sister is somewhat of a, well, I'm going to use this term loosely, but expert in this. And
Enneagram.
Expert. Yes. Quote unquote expert. And I called her because this discussion came up a little bit ago, like 2 weeks ago. And I asked her, like, Lara, what am I? Like, what number am I? What am I supposed to be? And she's like, I don't know. You're an anomaly. And I'm like, oh my gosh. She was telling everybody at the table what they were. And then I'm like, I'm your brother. We grew up together. You don't know what I am. So I don't know, man.
You're unclassifiable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So maybe to start into this, like I said, none of us are experts, and we're not going to be like coming in here and saying, hey, because of we've done all this research and all this understanding, here's some great insight. I think more so this is just a chance for us to explore what we've learned personally about personality differences, how to navigate that in relationships with family members, with coworkers, because it is a factor. It's something that is useful knowledge, and if you use it the right way, it can even help us in our understanding of how we relate to God and how we interact with each other in ministry and with the other members of the church and stuff like that. So, Jacob, how does having a better understanding of your personality, how has that helped you?
Yeah. So there's people who are vehemently against it, and there's people who it almost turns slightly religious for them. Like it becomes a box they want to live in. And so the goal would be to not live in either of those extremes.
Right.
For me personally, I love learning, and I love learning about things that make me wiser about myself and others. My dad, who his foremost revelation is about identity. Mm-hmm. And so when I first got into this, I think it was the first thing I looked into was StrengthsFinder. And it's like 10, 12 years ago. And I was like, Dad, you need to take this assessment. He's like, absolutely not. And we fought about it for a while. And
no way.
And finally got down to, he's like, listen, it took a lifetime of me like working for the revelation of grace and my identity in Christ, because my identity was so messed up that I don't want anything or anyone to tell me who I am. I just want the scriptures. I want Jesus to tell me who I am. And I'm like, I totally get it. That's fine. And if that's the frame you're coming from, fantastic. Because that is a danger of any personality assessment. The one that's probably most in vogue right now would be Enneagram, but there's also Myers-Briggs, there's the DISC, and then there's a few other ones that aren't quite as popular, but they still exist. They abound. Personality assessments abound.
I mean, they're rampant on social media too, right? Like they'll just like, hey, take this thing, figure out what you are, take this test. You know, there's like the Disney princess personality test, you know, or whatever. There's like all kinds of different ones. But there's something fun about like, hey, I put in my answers and then it tells me something about me. I think maybe what is sort of being pricked there is that need for identity. So something your dad was recognizing is like, we oftentimes can use these things as a substitute for our true identity.
And that's always the problem for any believer, is who gets to tell me who I am. And in a world that is deprived of clarity around identity, we're searching for identity in almost anything. And now we have whole framework of identity politics. So that would be one major learning is in any assessment, which I love. I love that kind of learning. There always has to be a distance between that person, that whatever that assessment is, and your identity. You have to be able to separate. I am in Christ. And being in Christ, part of my wiring, part of my bent, part of my distractions or temptations are around this particular assessment or what I've learned from this assessment. So, you know, on Enneagram, I mostly I find that in the assessment, I'm kind of like a hybrid between a 5, a 1, and a 3. And it's easy to say, well, I'm a 5. And that's not necessarily like wrong. But do I find my identity? Do I let this assessment tell me who I am because of that particular answer, because of that particular bent of an Enneagram 5, or in the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INTP. So what is that? Is that who I am? Well, not necessarily. So that's the biggest thing in whatever evaluation, assessment, personality, whatever. It cannot become your identity in the sense of how I define myself is based on this particular framework. We define ourselves in Christ. That's how we're defined. And if we want to supplement that with some level of understanding, fine, but you don't supplement it as your identity. And that's where that's when I start seeing it go from being kind of a fun learning to now a structure you're building your life around. Well, because I'm a Enneagram 4, therefore you being a 5, here's how we're supposed to relate, and here's who you are. And like at that point I start saying, well, then I'm going to change. Because like, you're not going to tell me who I am based on your framework. There's a little bit of spite and attitude in me. I get that from my dad, just so you know. But like I get some spite in me.
Don't pin me down. Exactly. Don't tell me who I am.
So that's where how to find the middle is you can totally shut it off. That's probably the safer of the two. You can go all in and you start defining yourself, the world, and each other through that lens. That's called a worldview. And that worldview needs to be shaped by Scripture, not by an Enneagram or Myers-Briggs personality assessment. But for me, it's been learning on, okay, I have these common temptations. I have these common struggles that generally are around that type. And here's how in Christ I can overcome that. Or my wife scores an Enneagram 2, which is the servant. And by learning some more about that type, not making her, defining her by that type, but knowing those are some common characteristics that she embodies, I can love her better because I've learned that about her, that just observation and experience, I might not pick up on some of those. But when she says, oh yeah, the common struggle is to martyr yourself for a number 2, I can start recognizing quicker, yeah, honey, you kind of martyr yourself. And so here's how I'm going to help you on that. The servant wants to be served every once in a while. So that just, if it's a tool to love each other better and to understand how God made you, fantastic, great. Right. I don't have any problem with that. Sometimes, though, there can be subtle things embedded by the enemy in this, and it becomes a cause for distraction at the best, or at the worst, a formation of identity that I think is not healthy.
Yeah. So for you, in your exploration of your INTP, Enneagram 5, whatever, labels, what things have resonated with you in your learning about, and you've done some of these assessments or whatever, and have they been things that have been helpful in maybe in Hannah understanding you a little better?
I don't know about that.
maybe not. I mean, I've got actually it's the logician is the INTP. I've got it pulled up because that's what I am too. And it's just, I always find it fun to kind of read even some of these descriptions, because
I know I can be quirky about a few things. Well, maybe more than a few.
I'm looking at one of them right here. I'm a little pen pouch organized by color.
I have quirks. And so in my 20s, when I'm growing in my understanding of who I am, I'm developing, like having a revelation of identity at a young age was awesome. But growing into an adult where you're on a career path, you're navigating your calling. Once I started settling, okay, I'm called to ministry. I feel called to pastoring, feel called to leading. Okay, well then how do I do that with skill? How do I do that? How do I grow in that? And so those started to be helpful in, okay, well, I'm wired with some quirkiness. On StrengthsFinder, my top strength is input. Like I'll just consume information quickly, and I crave that. It was nice knowing that about me, that wasn't just a negative quirk. It's just a wiring. It's how God made me. My second one, this probably was the most helpful. The second one on StrengthsFinder was intellection. The strength is like you're fine staying in the theoretical, and like a good conversation is one that provokes your intellect. Meaning, I don't need to walk away with anything practical for this to be a good, stimulating conversation. But small talk, super annoying. And I always thought, like, well, am I just rude? Or when I was a youth pastor, so Tyler would have felt some of this. Like, to me, a good sermon that I'm listening to is one that made me think.
Right.
Not telling me what to do.
Right.
And so I thought everybody wanted to listen to a good sermon that way.
What'd you think, Tyler?
I'm the exact opposite. So I remember I had to literally sit by a adult in youth to explain to me what the heck you were talking about. I had an interpreter.
So I enjoy in sermons to be confused.
Don't get me wrong, but I'll say this. So that wasn't my preference, but the more I sat under that, the more I started to like that and enjoy that. So like It may not have been initially what I enjoyed or liked or whatever.
Yeah.
But there was also no choice because I was like 14.
And your mom was definitely of the mindset, it doesn't matter what you want. You're going to church.
You're going to church. And so, but I grew to really enjoy that. So,
and that's when I first started speaking to adults. I found out that the vast majority of adults do not enjoy that kind. Mm-hmm. They want things to be easy. And there's nothing necessarily inherently wrong. I just didn't know that. I didn't know that about me, and I didn't know that about people. I thought everybody was like me. You want to be confused, and when you feel confused, you'll be spurred on for growth and for knowledge and for like, I want to chase that down. Don't tell me how to think about that. Show me where it's at, and I'll chase it down. And not everybody like that. So I, by learning that about me, it also helped me understand how people are not like me, and that's okay. So that was one of those things. And then like INTP, introverted, like one of the most helpful things was recognizing as an introvert, it doesn't mean that I don't like people. And hopefully all the other introverts at the table can just be like, yeah, we felt the same way. Yep. Introvert's not that you don't like people. It's not that
it's not antisocial.
It's not antisocial. It just means you get your energy from being alone. Extroverts get their energy from being with people.
Yeah.
Introverts need to be around people and extroverts need to be alone. It's just in balance. The balance is not the same 1-to-1. That was very helpful for me because I'm a pastor and I don't like being around people a lot. Mm-hmm. And it made me feel bad. Like, does that mean I don't love people? And what it was is just understanding that introverts get their energy from being alone. It made me realize when I'm long periods of always being around people, always talking, always socializing, my energy gets drained. And then I'm around people again, and I don't bring a healthy me into that environment. I have to almost pretend like I want to be there. And so that helped me then pastor by making sure I get sufficient alone time so that I'm filled up with energy to be around people whom I love, whom I want to hug, who I want to talk with in that period of time. And then I need to recharge. So Sundays for me, not just speaking, not just preaching, but just being at service is exhausting. And I love those people, even the people who I wouldn't gel with or normally like I know this is the body of Christ. And so I'm going to love these people that are hard to love. And I'm going to enjoy this conversation that's uncomfortable. And I can do that because then like Sunday afternoon, Monday, like I'm zonked. Mm-hmm. And not only preaching, pouring out and being empty, but being around people and talking and all that stuff. Like I just need to be quiet. I need to be alone. So that's just one example. There's many layers to that, or one more then, sorry. Knowing that I kind of favor an Enneagram 5, one of the things about the Enneagram 5 is a detachment from emotion. So like emotions aren't something that framework is super in touch with, like able to separate yourself from your emotion. And that helps me like I don't get emotionally attached to almost anything. And if you just read through some of like the weaknesses or some of the results is like the Enneagram 5, like it is hard to develop relationship with because like I can keep an emotional distance for a long time. And I got no problem with it, which is also a struggle with my memory because memory is usually associated with emotional provocation, bad and good. If I don't have a lot of that, then I don't have a lot of really hardcore memories. So my wife can remember everything and I can remember almost nothing. So
unless it engaged you emotionally.
Unless it engaged me emotionally or stimulated me intellectually.
Like throwing up on a Disney ride.
That was some emotions attached to that. So that's made me wiser about myself, but it doesn't define me.
Right.
Like at some point, okay, I get energized by being alone, but I have 5 children and my wife has 4 siblings who, amongst just that side of the family, there's 16 children. So there's sometimes like a whole week where there's cousins at the house or siblings at the house or people over. And like, just because I'm, quote, an introvert and need alone time does not give me an excuse to be a jerk to my nieces and nephews or my children or my wife or my siblings or guests. It doesn't give me an excuse to be a jerk just because I don't get energy from being around people. And that's where I see people they use personality assessments as a mask to hide behind. And that's not healthy. That's not Christ-like.
So one of the things I think has been helpful for me is seeing these things as a recognition of sort of where my default behaviors or default patterns might go, and recognizing the need for Jesus to help fill in those gaps. So like for me, I come to service on Sunday, I can get very just focused on whatever the task is. And hey, we've got a service to produce. We've got to get cameras ready. We got to get lights set, sound, I'm thinking through all those things. And I can very much just shut off the fact that there's even other people there. Like it's just knowing that that's a way that I'm wired. I'm in my head like all the time. And I have to intentionally choose to put myself in an environment to where I'm going to have a conversation face to face with somebody. And even if it is awkward, or even if like the small talk is terrifying too, because I'm just not good at it.
Yeah,
like I can't
absolutely.
just walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, how's the weather?" or whatever, the typical thing. If I have something in common with somebody and we can engage intellectually and talk about something, like,
oh yeah,
hours will go by. I'm like, oh, I consumed all of your time. Sorry, I'm gonna move on to the next thing. Yeah. But the recognition for me was like realizing, just because I'm wired that way, church isn't designed for me to be comfortable. Like it's not like my comfort and my preferences aren't and shouldn't be what's on the forefront of my mind all the time. That's, I think, the tendency for introverts to get self-oriented in social environments is a real temptation. And you have to recognize it, and you have to be willing to say, hey, okay, yeah, I've reached my max. Like, hey, honey, can we go home now? That kind of those awkward conversations of like, what? We've only been here an hour. I'm like, man, it feels like it's been 5. Like the recognizing that it is a weakness or something that is just baked into my personality a little bit doesn't excuse it from, that it doesn't make it an excuse for me to not be kind or to not show the fruits of the Spirit. The whole point isn't that, and the whole point of the fruits of the Spirit is that it's God's life living through you. Yeah. And so, if it all just comes from your own personality, there's not really much of God's life in that anyway. And so, I think recognizing that there's an opportunity, it's almost like, I guess, Paul talking about the thorn in the flesh thing. It's like recognizing like, hey, this is a piece of me that is deficient. I need grace to even fill in the gap in that area.
Well, it a lot of this came more to the forefront when we had Abby and Austin living with us, and there was 13 of us in the home. When things like, so a simple one, both my wife and I, both Hannah and I, are introverts. And so like Hannah, though, is a people person. So we have to navigate that, where her desire to be with people, around people, has to be balanced with being alone. But then there's 5 children clawing at her all the time. So I have to help her with that. But we're both introverted, meaning we both get energy from being alone. And we didn't realize how much in our family, we created a culture, an introverted culture. And so I think we have at least one extroverted child. There's potentially 2, but I know at least 2 of my children for certain are introverts. They get energy from being alone. There's a third that I think is an introvert, but I'm not going to say that they are. And then 2 that's kind of up in the air. But like as a whole,
it just sounded like you had like 12 kids just then. I got lost in the numbers. I was like, man, how many kids does he have?
5. I got
Gotcha.
2, 1, 2.
2, 1, 2.
2 that are could be extroverts. One that they might be an omnivert, and then two that I'm pretty certain are introverted. That's both introverted, extroverted. Gotcha. So like it's a scale. It's a 100-point scale. 50 is right in the middle, and so you could be 60 something introverted, which means basically you're 10 points above middle.
Gotcha.
Not 60%. It's anyway. Yeah. So we just didn't really recognize how much of a culture of that we had. And Abby and Austin move in, and Abby is probably slightly extroverted, not extremely extroverted, but slightly extroverted. But Asher, their oldest, is extremely, he might be like a 95 point extrovert. He gets his energy from people. And so Asher is just always on. Mm-hmm. And I did not realize how extroverted we are not until Asher is just so extrovert. And so a lot of times he and I were the first ones in the kitchen in the morning, and the fun times we had in the morning working that through. But I was learning how to be around an extremely extroverted person. I didn't realize how often I'm not, and learning to love him well. But in the same way, Austin would say he falls in the Enneagram 1, which is, I don't know what it's called, but it's the one of perfectionist imperfections. So like the 1 recognizes all the imperfections, and it begins with the imperfections in themselves, but then often in an unhealthy form projects the imperfections on others. And so they can always recognize what's wrong and how people aren't doing enough or things aren't right.
Great. And he's my boss. Thanks.
Austin is a mature and wise and healthy 1.
True.
But when we're living together, we're around each other all the time. So you're going to see both the healthy and the unhealthy. And I'm fall in the Enneagram 5, which is like, I can easily not care about anything.
Yeah.
I can switch my care meter off. And then my wife's 2, so she's always serving. And Abby is a 9, peacemaker. And just wants everybody to be happy. And so learning where the easiest conflicts arise, where you don't want to be rude, so you don't say something, but then you internalize it, and then you keep internalizing it over and over and over. So I think on the podcast, the bonus episode where they talk to, you'll hear Abby talking about learning conflict, learning how conflict is not to be avoided. It just needs to be done healthy. Well, my wife's not afraid of conflict, at all. So we'll just jump right into it. And I had to care, or at least acknowledge to Austin, hey, I recognize this is imperfect. And here's where we can work on this. So those kinds of assessments, it wasn't about identity. It was about how do we be in relationship and love each other well without defining each other this way.
Right.
But just know that that's the temptation. Abby is going to internalize frustration, because she is wired like a peacemaker. I just want everybody to be happy. And often, in an unhealthy way, trying everybody else to be happy is at their own unhappiness. Or my wife is just going to serve. And then potentially the people closest to her, she will tend to neglect. And so we talk through those things. Me, I can just kind of be a bit of a jerk. I can just shut it off. Because I don't want to be emotional. I'm frustrated, so I'm just going to shut it off, and I'm just not going to care. And so we all had to repent. We all had to love well. So those were when it was getting helpful to know those things. Otherwise, sometimes you just feel like you got to dance around things. But just having that language when we would sit at night around the table, and we would just be able to have these discussions with some wisdom and knowledge, because of being able to have that common language.
Right. So having some baseline around the differences between these different types, at least for me, the benefit is that I can now value a perspective from somebody else's point of view. Mm-hmm. If the assumption is that everything that, if everybody sees the world the same way I do, I think there may be a train going on or something. Do you guys hear that ringing?
I don't know if any.
And it's not just my train of thought. Bad joke, everybody. Yeah. Anyway, if you guys hear a ringing, we're recording this in Jacob's office. There could be rings. This is an old building.
Potentially a train.
Could be a train. Hopefully
could
it doesn't.
Be something else.
Hopefully it doesn't derail and take our conversation off somewhere like that just happened. But anyway, but if we have this perspective, everybody should see things the way that I see it.
Yeah.
Then there's going to be gaps between what I value versus what my wife values versus what my kids value. And then just recognizing that, hey, we experience the world differently.
Yeah.
Allows me to appreciate what somebody else, what their perspective is more. Mm-hmm. And so with Audrey and I, Audrey is kind of right on that line between introvert and extrovert. If anybody knows my wife who listens to this podcast, you'll know that she's very outgoing. She's very she can go into a room and have a conversation with anybody, but then she gets home and she needs to recharge.
Yeah.
She does sort of hit a limit at some point and has to recharge. So she's actually a whole lot more quiet at home than what most people would experience. Yeah. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a quiet person. So a lot of our time spent together is just being quiet and not really talking much. And so recognizing even that tendency, we have to intentionally, and I'm usually the initiator of hey, we need to talk, not because there's a thing we have to solve, but I'm recognizing we need to engage in relationship with each other and conversation and stuff like that. And so to me, these things are helpful, but they, just like with anything, there's a temptation to give it more value than it needs to have.
Yeah, that just be cautious of the phrase, I am a whatever. It's not uncommon to use that phrase. So I'm not saying don't ever use the phrase. Just be cautious how much you say that and how much you allow something or someone to define you. Even to the point where I tried to, it sounds like an Enneagram 5 kind of thing. Even the way we talk about emotions versus I am versus I have. I am angry versus I am experiencing feelings of anger. It's nothing wrong to say I am angry, but at some point you might actually start believing I am an angry person, and that's not true. And so just that would be the one caution would be just identify the number of times you say I am or you are, and just recognize that isn't always the full picture. That's not always the case. So Tyler, you haven't talked a whole lot, and I know you, we mentioned earlier, you actually haven't done any of these assessments or really know specifically.
So I was thinking about something I have done.
Yeah.
It's not quite personality, but it probably lends towards your personality. And that was the love languages test. Yep. I think that would probably play somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. But it helped my wife and I kind of identify certain needs in one another. For me, I'm definitely recharged by being alone. If I'm not, I turn into a jerk. But my wife, her love language was quality time. And but it's not just sitting there being quiet. It's let's have intense conversation. And she really enjoys a long, a 3-hour conversation about how we feel and what we're going through and where we're headed. She wants clarity around things. And I'm I don't know.
Have you read the book, His Needs, Her Needs?
We have the book. I know. I'm sorry.
I have not read it yet.
Yeah, I have not read that, but we do own it. So I should probably.
This might be in a whole nother episode, but it's so that sounds like, and this is where love languages, there's overlap.
Yeah.
And it potentially is helpful. That sounds like her number one need is intimate conversation.
Yes.
That's my wife's number one need.
Yeah.
So you're just describing how about every other day, it's we need to have this talk, and it's is something wrong? Nothing's wrong.
See,
we just need to talk about all this stuff.
I'm always what happened? Why? What changed?
Yeah. There's no such thing as cruise control in our marriage. I don't think there should ever be a cruise control in any marriage, but particularly
And I'll say it's not just a guy-girl thing. I think I have more of a need for intimate conversation than Audrey does.
Yeah.
Intimate conversation, I think, is number 3 or number 4 on my needs. Yeah. So it does meet a need.
Yeah.
But like that sounds like that's her highest.
I don't know that it's on my list. Like, I'm not saying I don't enjoy talking to my wife.
Right. Well, there's 10, and you can rank 1 to 10,
and it's probably pretty low.
It's probably 8 or 9.
Yeah. So for me, it's just that doesn't. I don't know, but that just doesn't do.
But it's in the same category of it. Potentially, these things can make you wise for a relationship.
Yes. So, you just have to do it. I don't know what else to say, man. You just have to have sit down and have the conversation. And I do find myself having to like remind myself that this is a need. It's not just
this is how I love her well.
Yes.
Not, oh God, how do we just get through this?
Yeah. Here we go. Yeah. Like, I just got to buckle up. No, it's like, I want to have those conversations because I know that she enjoys and she needs those conversations.
So is your wife introverted? Does she get energy from being alone?
Oh, heck yeah. She does not.
Which in a home of 4 boys, plus an introverted husband,
she doesn't.
That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. She doesn't get that. I know we've got at least one. The other 2 are too young. 2 are older, and the oldest is definitely, I think he's an introvert. I think so. The second born, however, Ellis, we have a plumber come over and he will not leave the guy alone. I'm like, Ellis, stop. Like, he's got to do his job. And he just wants to talk. He just wants to be around people. It's all he wants to do. So
that just reminds me. So Eva is probably my most introverted one, but all of my girls are actually pretty friendly in social situations. Yeah. But Eva, she has this thing that whenever we go through a drive-through, it is so important that the person taking our order sees her.
Yep.
And it's like, I need to say hi to them. Like, she needs to. So I'll roll down the window.
That's sweet.
I'm like, she's just trying to brighten their day. She just wants to say hi, and she's like,
yeah, she's your extrovert.
Yeah. Well, we drove off from a drive-thru one time, and she's like upset, and she's like, they didn't hear me say thank you. I'm like, honey, it's not that big a deal. Chill out. Anyway,
that is crazy. Funny. Literally, you're describing Ellis because we go through Chick-fil-A and he has to say thank you or hi or have a good day or whatever. Like it's a need for him to have to be able to talk to people.
So funny.
Wow, guys. I don't know if I do have an extrovert in my family. None of my kids feel the need to do that.
Oh, dude, he just loves people.
So I think they picked it up. They picked that up from Audrey more so than me, for sure. It's not like I'm rude at a drive-through.
Yeah.
I'm always maybe mildly irritated because of my voice does not translate through the because I have a lower voice and the
Tyler and I don't have that problem.
No.
Well,
not at all.
So I have to like yell into the thing to order my food because my voice is just not carrying.
You got to go up 2 or 3 semitones.
Yeah, I got to
hello,
everybody. I got to do my Mickey Mouse impression. Like, hi, I'd like a cheeseburger. Just so that I can be heard.
And then you get to the window. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot. But so actually I had Alea with me last night, and we went through Jack in the Box. And she was just sitting there. She's like, you didn't say thank you for the drink. I'm like, I'll say thank you when we get our food. Like, I'm just kind of like, I'm business as usual, man. I'm just like, hey, I'm on to the next thing mentally. And so it's good to have somebody with you to remind you, hey, there's other people around.
In the DISC personality, you would be a high C, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I was like C, D, D, C, just like they were very
So close. C is very task-oriented, detail-oriented. That's mine as well. And the I and the D are more people-oriented. The S and the I are more people-oriented. D and C are more task-oriented.
Right.
So the D and the C, if you're high on those, like you can totally ignore people.
Yeah.
Like it's not hard to ignore people.
And it's not malicious. It's not like, hey, I don't like people, or I'm like aggressively trying to isolate myself. It's just they don't occur to me.
Yeah.
Oh. So just even like in our job setting, like I'm a pastor, and if I don't consciously pay attention to grace, I literally can go straight through a whole sanctuary and go sit down in the front row and not see or talk to anybody. Mm-hmm. And like, I'd be okay. I think everybody else is okay. But when I started pastoring adults, I realized they didn't appreciate that very, very much. And so I realized, you know what? I don't think I can rely on my wiring to be a good pastor. I think I'm going to have to rely on grace and actually love people well, not just love people on my terms.
You have to work at it.
Yeah.
So
like, I'm okay being ignored a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, like, as long as my close network of friends have some kind of connection, like, I don't need a lot. But very little of the world is like me. So, this is not loving people well.
Here's one of the weaknesses of the logician, the INTP type. And this resonates with me. Let's see if it resonates with you. So, disconnected. Logicians can get lost in their own train of thought, even when they're with other people. When these personalities finally resurface with something to say, they may find that the conversation has moved on without them. This can cause them to feel disconnected from other people, especially in large social gatherings. Do you ever get that feeling sometimes?
Every day. It's the number of times my wife and I, like, she's talking about one thing, doesn't even take a breath, and moves on to something totally different. And there was a couple times where now after 14 years of marriage, all it takes is me going, she's like, you're laughing at me. Yeah, honey, I think I'm with you, but I do have some whiplash from you switching gears entirely, because I was processing what you were saying, and I had an answer, but that was like 4 minutes ago. You've had 4 other subjects since then.
Yep. So that is so funny. I had this thing, and I still do it.
I need a comment or something. Leave a review. Like, I need to know who else is like this, because my goodness, and it's not just like a male female thing.
No,
but man, conversations can move on way quicker than I'm ready for them.
I had this thing that I noticed that I do where I'll answer in my head. Do you ever do that? So I'm
Absolutely.
I'm having a conversation with Audrey, and she's asking a question, and I answer her in my head, but I don't say it out loud. It's like I forgot to use my voice, and I was like, I told you this, and you're like, no, you didn't. I'm like, oh no, I did it again. Like I'm carrying on a conversation in my brain instead of engaging, looking eye to eye, and say, hey, let's engage the full range of bodily motion and actually speak, and not just live up in my brain.
Yeah, I'm curious, Tyler, because we've already established that you tend, between the three of us, to be more in touch with your emotions than
that's true.
When your wife asks you, how do you feel about that? Do you usually have an answer?
But not. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm like, super descriptive about my answer. But yeah, like I feel good about that. I feel peace, or I feel whatever, or like that makes me happy. Or, but I mean, it's not like I don't go into detail on it.
Your brain locks up, and you have to think.
What? How do I feel?
Well,
no, I don't have to. Think
usually, see, that's the point.
Yeah.
I almost never have an answer to the question, how do you feel about that? Because almost always I say, I don't know. I need to think about it. And it's funny for someone who's more in touch with their feelings and emotions, like, just tell me how you feel. And I have to say, I don't know how I feel. I need to think about it.
See, that's strange to me. Like, that's a weird thing. Okay. You're like, I need to go look at my graph and figure out
the emotion wheel. Yeah. Have you the big emotion wheel? Yeah. Like, I need to go find my emotion wheel to figure out which one.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely not that way. But I will say, I'm not like overly emotional, but there are people who pull it out of me.
Yeah.
You're one of those people. And I don't know how that happened or whatever, but like there was a time where I think it was right after Urias, and I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. I walk up to you in the sanctuary, give you a hug, hadn't seen you in a while, and I just start bawling. And I'm just like crying, and I don't know why, but I'm just crying. I don't know if it's because the Lord was like, he can't cry, so you can do it for him or whatever. But I mean, I was weeping, and I was like, all right, I got to quit hugging you. I'm about to go on the stage and lead worship. Anyways, yeah,
that's awesome.
I'm pretty emotional. I am.
I didn't use that phrase. You use that phrase. I said you tend to be more in touch.
No, I'm okay with saying that. Okay. I'm pretty emotional. Movies get to me. Songs will get to me. Like,
Yeah.
Makes you a good
found
artist.
I'm definitely more emotional, or at least more outwardly emotional after having kids.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So like
for sure.
Movies, like especially anything that has like a father, daughter, father, son kind of theme going on. I'm just like, it's affecting me much more than when I was younger. But I also remember when I was a kid, I was a lot more emotional. Mm-hmm. And I think when I'm sort of reflecting back of like, as my personality developed and stuff, being emotional was a negative thing for me when I was young, because it would get me made fun of. It would get me bullied. And so I found a means of coping by almost repressing that, detaching from that a little bit. And as my personality developed, now I have to be more intentional to even engage emotionally. So like even about like important things, like in a worship service, like I want to be emotionally engaged, but it takes a lot more work, which is ironic to say, but it takes a lot more for me to like be emotionally moved, because I've sort of got this shell that I'm built around.
We probably need to have more conversations, because I think I'm raising Israel as a little you.
Yeah. Israel.
I'm pretty sure Israel is you.
Yeah.
There's some of me in there, but he's a little bit more his mom side of the family than his dad's.
Yeah, I see so much of I see little Josh whenever I talk to him most of the time, because like whatever he's into, he is into. Okay.
So last night we're back into astronomy. He went through a phase at like 4 years old where he was super into astronomy. Yeah. And out of the blue last night, he picks up one of the old little telescopes we had, little toy telescopes, and he's got set up in his room for quiet time looking at the moon, and then like starting to write out tools that astronomers will need. Yeah. And asking, someone gave us a really nice telescope that I put out at my parents'. So last night he's saying, "Dad, could you pick me up from school tomorrow and we go to Mama's and pick up my telescope?"
That's awesome. Yeah.
And so I'm like, that's okay, cool. We're riding that train because it's not Pokemon.
Thing. Yeah, he'll find a thing and he'll be into it for however long until he's not, and then he's on to something.
And he's just on something else.
I'm still that way, but the problem is that I'm into a lot of things all at the same time, and managing that time.
You're going to be an important part of your nephew's life.
That's awesome.
I'm gonna need your help.
I distinctly remember being about his age, probably a little younger, and going to Walmart or Toys R Us or someplace like that. I didn't want a toy. I wanted an atlas of the stars. Like I wanted to know all the constellations. Yep. I wanted to like have them memorized. And
he had a
was a weird kid.
He had a book on like space. I don't know where it's at. And last night, like he was determined. He wakes up this morning before his alarm and is rummaging through all the boxes that are still in our house looking for his astronomy book. Like that's the one agreement we had with Pokemon is we said like we're cool. Like we think we can navigate this well with him and take the good with the good and spit out the bad about it. Whatever. We can navigate. This is a way to parent him.
Right.
And our one condition is like, Israel, you can do this as long as you don't get obsessed. Mm-hmm. And then occasionally he was like, I'm getting obsessed. We're like, yep, let's take a break.
Yeah. Oh, man.
That's so awesome.
Funny. It's so good to have parents who are aware. Not that my parents weren't, but I didn't mean that as a slight. I really didn't. But just like to recognize even these things in young kids, and like, hey, they have to be parented. Mm-hmm. They have to grow out of this, because I'm just like, I'm reading through even some of these descriptions of that personality type, and I'm just like, oh man, I have to be very careful, because I can get obsessive about whatever. Like, hopefully it's the right things.
Yeah.
So it can be a strength, right? So if it's focused in the right direction, I can get obsessive about the right things. But it can be a weakness as well, where you get obsessive about the wrong thing. All of a sudden, you've completely shifted the orientation of your life in a direction, and you're like, oh, okay, I got to recalibrate here.
Yeah.
So
on the Myers-Briggs, Hannah and I are almost opposites. Outside of introverts, the only one we have in common. But the last two identifiers on that, I'm INTP. The T is thinking and P is perceiving. Hers is ISFJ. F is feeling and J is judging. And so like we really are opposites on that, and trying to learn how to understand that skillfully, so that when we're working together on something, I know she's gonna be a feeler, and I've got to I've got to pay attention to her feelings. Not just like her personal emotion feelings, but like she has a feeling about something. Not only that, that's combined with her having a gift of discernment. And so like, I'm going to think about something. She's just going to say, this is how I feel about it. I feel like this is not wise, or I feel like we need to do this, or I feel like we don't need to do that. And like, it's like, I'm still in my thinking about it and learning how to work well with each other on that. And then judging versus perceiving. Judging tends to look at things through black, white, like right, wrong, black, white. It is what it is. It's just one or the other. Whereas perceiving tends to be able to look at like a wider range of possibilities and not so quick move to right or wrong, but what's possible. And you're just perceiving variations and variables. And so that makes for conversations as well. That her judging turns into judgment, and we're like, hey, let's back up a little bit. And then my perceiving is like, I can't make a decision because there's all these possibilities and there's not really a right or wrong here. And she's like, this is what we're going to do. And I'm like, yes, ma'am.
Yep. That's it's so funny because Audrey's she has some similarities with Hannah, but she's on the perceiving side, not the judging side. So sometimes Audrey and I will just circle around a decision for just too long.
You guys something just never eat dinner.
Yeah. It's like, what are we going to eat? I'm like, I don't know. I'm
it's like 8:30. It's like we should probably eat by now.
We both just list the possibilities of what we could eat.
You guys just dream about it.
We could do that. Like, man, what would it be like to order from here? Oh, what were we talking about? It's
or like funny. It's 5 o'clock, awesome. 5:30, and it's like, if we're gonna make dinner, we should probably start cooking.
Yeah.
That's where. Yeah, I'm terrible at that. Thankfully, there's a judger in our home.
Yeah, somebody
can just make a call,
make a decision,
and it does because the number of times she's like, "I want you to lead me," and I'm like, "Honey, you're the wiser one. Whatever this situation is, like you're the wiser one in that. Like I'm cool just going along with that."
That's funny. All right, well. That may bring us to the end of the personality conversation. If you guys enjoyed this conversation and you want to hear more maybe on this topic, or maybe we get some non-introverts in the conversation to represent that side, just let us know. Tyler, you want to wrap things up for us today?
Yep. Thank you everyone for listening. You can like, comment, or subscribe if you like this content. Tell a friend. That's probably most important, I would say. And we will catch you in the next one.